Welcome to The Debate. We thank you for making the time to listen to Technostress, the always-on anxiety episode number 6, a mini-series from EAQ and Associates presenting a human capital intelligence audio podcast to better understand the most effective ways to maximize human capital resources and how an organization can enhance performance, engagement, productivity, and deliver desired outcomes by creating alignment between management and their employees. Today, we are unpacking a crisis that is quietly suffocating modern enterprises. We are talking about digital debt.
Yeah, and right now, software complexity is costing the United States economy nearly $1 trillion annually. Think about that number, $1 trillion.
It is staggering. It is almost too large to comprehend until you break it down to the individual level, right? We are talking about employees losing nearly a full workday. Almost 7 hours every single week, just battling fragmented software, redundant applications, and disjointed communication channels.
Exactly. It is a massive drain, and to guide our discussion today, we are utilizing the framework of the Human Capital Intelligence Program. This approach, it leans heavily on the foundational work of HR architect Ernest Goss.
Right.
He is a human resources practitioner, an executive coach, and a Six Sigma black belt. And he has worked with frontline employees, organized labor, managers, and executive leadership teams, all really focused on outcomes for organizations. Goss provides a highly rigorous, data-driven methodology for diagnosing these exact workplace failures.
And having a framework like that brings us directly to the central question of our show today. When we look at this widespread exhaustion, are we looking at a structural failure or a human one? So is Technostress fundamentally a systemic architectural problem of tool sprawl that demands an organizational digital declutter?
Right.
Or on the flip side, is it a psychological and cultural crisis of techno-invasion that requires new human boundaries and adaptive skills?
Well, I take the position that this is absolutely undeniably a structural issue. The friction we're seeing requires a top-down reduction of digital debt and a deliberate streamlining of enterprise tools to free our workforce from cognitive overload. Basically, we have to fix the architecture first.
And I take the opposing view. While nobody loves dealing with a messy intranet, Technostress is fundamentally a behavioral and cultural issue, and it's rooted in hyperconnectivity. An organizational tool audit means absolutely nothing if we do not address the psychological inability to detach from work. You can streamline the software all you want, but without cultural boundaries, those optimized tools will simply be used to interrupt employees faster.
Okay, let me elaborate on why the structural argument is the only realistic starting point here. The fact is, we have reached the literal, physical limit of human productivity within our current architectural structures. The data here is incredibly stark. If we look at the Microsoft Work Trend Index 2025, it highlights what they call the infinite workday, and it reveals a devastating metric, the 53-80 split. 53% of leaders are pushing for more output and greater productivity, while 80% of employees report having absolutely no energy left to innovate.
Wait, let me just pause you there. 80% of employees have zero energy left? That is a staggering metric. They are completely tapped out.
They are running on empty. And why? Because they are drowning in what Microsoft defines as work about work. The average knowledge worker is now managing 15 different software solutions and 4 separate communication channels simultaneously. Just keeping the plate spinning, the cognitive load required just to maintain that digital infrastructure leaves no room for actual value creation. This is where the Human Capital Intelligence Program's reliance on data-driven architecture is so vital.
Sure.
Applying a Six Sigma approach, as HR architect Ernest Goss does, puts the burden squarely on the employer. And for our listeners who usually associate Six Sigma with manufacturing, in this context, it means treating digital waste, like redundant apps, the exact same way a factory would treat physical waste on an assembly line. You hunt it down, you measure its impact, and you eliminate it, because the system itself is structurally broken.
Well, your description of the exhaustion is perfectly accurate, but your diagnosis of the root cause misses the human element entirely. Simply removing a few applications fundamentally misunderstands the psychological damage that has already been done, and damage that continues to be done by the culture of the modern workplace. Let's look at the 2026 Frontiers in Psychology study, which is one of the most comprehensive models we have on this topic. It demonstrates that techno-invasion, which is defined as the blurring of work and home life, is the single strongest predictor of emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and depressive disorders among workers.
So you're saying the sheer volume of apps is secondary to how they are actually used?
Precisely. The problem is not simply that an employee has 15 tools on their laptop. The problem is the cultural expectation that they are perpetually available on those 15 tools. It is the expectation of the infinite workday. If an organization does not undergo a profound cultural shift to support actual guilt-free disconnection, all a streamlined toolset will do is make the techno-invasion more efficient. You are treating the symptom, the app sprawl, while completely ignoring the disease, which is a workplace culture that refuses to let people power down.
I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective on where that friction actually originates. The cultural expectations you are talking about are largely a byproduct of architectural chaos. When we look at the Freshworks report on the cost of complexity, we see that organizational complexity and fragmented software drain an average of 7% of a company's annual revenue.
7%? That is equivalent to an entire research and development budget just vanishing into thin air.
Exactly. It vanishes because the friction is architectural. These tools are almost universally built for vendors to sell, not for the workers who actually use them. Think about a standard daily workflow now. A basic task spans 5 to 10 systems. The massive cognitive load happens during the handoffs and the context switches, moving between tools, re-authenticating, re-entering the exact same information.
The context switching is certainly frustrating, I will give you that. But is it really driving clinical burnout?
It absolutely is, because it destroys focus. Take multi-factor authentication, for example. We all know it is necessary for security, but it acts as a profound workflow interrupter. We have all been there. You are in the zone, writing a critical report, and suddenly you need to pull data from the HR portal. You have to pull your eyes away from the screen, find your phone, wait for the text cycle.
And it always takes longer than it should.
Exactly. You wait for the text cycle, type in a 6-digit code, and boom, your train of thought is completely derailed. Research shows it takes over 20 minutes on average to recover deep focus after a single interruption like that. The technology is creating the fatigue because the technology is fundamentally disjointed.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are blaming the layout of the digital office for the fact that the boss is demanding the employees sleep there. Yes, context switching is annoying. Yes, multi-factor authentication breaks a flow state, but that is not what is driving the clinical levels of technostress we are seeing. Let's look deeper into the research. A recent study in the Journal of Media Horizons found that sleep quality mediates the relationship between digital habits and emotional distress.
How does that apply to the software itself, though?
Because it proves that the mechanism of harm isn't the software interface, it's the intrusion. What does that study mean in practice? It means that even if you have a perfectly designed, completely frictionless, beautifully integrated digital system, it will still cause immense psychological harm if employees are experiencing the phantom buzz in their pockets while sitting at the dinner table with their families. It will still cause harm if the organizational culture expects an employee to log in and check project boards at 9 p.m. The physical mechanism translating digital habits into emotional exhaustion is the destruction of a restorative downtime. A seamlessly integrated dashboard does not cure the anxiety of feeling like you must always be visible and responsive to leadership.
But you can't ask that employee to establish healthy boundaries when the very foundation of their work is chaotic. You have to establish order first. This is precisely what Deloitte's 2025 Human Capital Trends Report outlines with the concept of stagility. That is the combination of stability and agility.
Stagility. That is an interesting concept. But how does it work in a fragmented system?
It doesn't. That is exactly the point. Employees cannot possibly be agile, and they certainly cannot manage their psychological well-being if their digital foundation is unstable. The employer has a structural obligation to provide stability, and that begins by decommissioning redundant software. We are rapidly moving into the era of agentic AI, where autonomous agents will reason and act on behalf of the user. You cannot successfully introduce intelligence on tap into a system that is already overflowing.
Because the AI just becomes another tool to manage?
Worse, if you ask an employee to use AI on top of 15 fragmented tools, they do not see a helper. They see a heavy anchor being handed to them while they are already drowning. This is the core methodology of human capital intelligence, designing workflows that align with actual human needs. By utilizing the Six Sigma data-driven architecture championed by HR architect Ernest Goss, organizations can map these processes, identify the digital bloat, and cut it out. Only then can you expect employees to navigate their day with psychological clarity.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that structural cleanup is largely performative if the leadership behaviors don't change alongside it? I actually looked at a 2025 meta-review from the Journal of Medical Internet Research. They analyzed digital wellness programs and structural interventions, and the results were pretty underwhelming. They found that these initiatives alone have highly variable and ultimately very small effects on employee anxiety and burnout.
So a cleaner intranet does not move the needle on its own?
Not at all. You cannot cure technostress with a cleaner intranet. What is actually required is authentic leadership. The DNA of a digital workplace is cultural, not technical. We are seeing a massive rise in FOBO, the fear of becoming obsolete, where 52% of workers worry about AI's impact on their future. In that environment of fear, an employee is going to treat every new platform, no matter how streamlined, as a digital leash.
Because they feel they have to prove their worth to the machine.
Exactly. To combat this, managers must actively model disconnection. They need to show up consistently on platforms like Viva Engage, communicate transparently, and, critically, they need to demonstrate that it is safe to log off. If a leader sends emails at 9 p.m., the culture is a 9 p.m. culture, regardless of how few apps the company uses. The solution is human leadership, not just IT architecture.
Authentic leadership is important, but leadership cannot overcome a broken system. I think this is the perfect moment to focus on the bridge to the issue, specifically partnering for fair exchange. This bridge is how we practically solve the problem of digital debt while addressing the human element. The fair exchange works like this. The employer takes the first step by committing to the digital declutter. They audit the systems, they remove the redundant tools, and they consolidate the workflow. They do this to save human attention. In return, the employee agrees to platform mastery.
Meaning they stop fighting the tools and start leveraging them?
Right. Instead of using 5 overlapping tools poorly, the employee commits to using the remaining streamlined set of tools at an absolute expert level. When this happens, we fundamentally shift the organizational dynamic. As the 2024 Harvard Business Publishing Global Leadership Development Study points out, we move away from traditional management, which is just controlling tasks, and we move toward potentializing the employee. When you potentialize an employee, their career growth becomes a primary business objective. The technology becomes an accelerator for their specific skills rather than a distraction that keeps them doing busy work.
I actually agree with the necessity of the fair exchange. And I think focusing on the bridge to the issue is highly relevant here. Partnering for that exchange is crucial. However, I frame the employee's side of that exchange very differently. It is not merely about achieving platform mastery. If we just train people to push the buttons on the new software faster, we are still treating them like components in a machine.
How would you frame their commitment then?
The employee's true commitment in this exchange is about cultivating super agency and adaptive skills. The Udemy 2026 Global Learning and Skills Trends report is incredibly telling here. They saw a 37% increase in critical thinking training and a 38% increase in decision-making training.
That is a massive jump for soft skills.
Because as AI handles the routine data processing, the human value proposition changes entirely. The employee's half of the coin is bringing judgment, empathy, and deep contextual understanding to the streamlined tech. They aren't just mastering a platform. They are ensuring that the tools serve a higher human strategy. They are providing the institutional memory and the creative spark that technology simply cannot replicate. That is what superagency is.
That is a fascinating way to frame it. But they can only bring that judgment and creativity if the employer has cleared the digital debt out of their way first. That is why the data-driven architecture is the prerequisite for superagency. You can't exercise critical thinking when you are spending 2 hours a day just searching for hidden files across 4 different unintegrated platforms.
And my counter is that clearing the digital debt only works if the employee feels psychologically safe enough to stop performing activity and start focusing on value. If the culture still measures an employee's worth by their response time to a direct message, they will never have the mental space to exercise that judgment, no matter how clean the system is.
I think we have illuminated exactly why the Human Capital Intelligence Program emphasizes that the digital workplace is the intersection of strategy, operations, and culture. We cannot look at these elements in isolation.
Precisely. The structural and the psychological are intertwined. You need the architecture to make the work possible, but you need the culture to make the work sustainable.
Let's bring this to its ultimate conclusion and look at the actual outcomes of crossing this bridge and partnering for that fair exchange. When an organization successfully navigates this, let us focus strictly on what the employer gains. For the employer, the gain is a massive increase in value-added work time. You get a focused, strategic workforce that is no longer burning out on administrative, digital busywork. By embracing the data-driven Six Sigma methodologies utilized by HR architect Ernest Goss, leadership can eliminate the friction that drains revenue. The employer stops paying for wasted cognitive load. Instead of a workforce that is trapped in reactive, constant context switching, the organization gains a proactive, highly agile team capable of leveraging new technologies like agentic AI for actual competitive advantage.
And we must look strictly at what the employee gains in this equation. For the employee, the gain is the reclamation of your human advantage. You get cognitive relief and a simpler, more effective way to work. By establishing real boundaries against techno-invasion and developing adaptive skills, you move from surviving the noise to thriving in the signal. You are no longer defined by your ability to clear notification badges. Instead, you gain the mental space to innovate, to exercise critical thinking, and to increase your own professional value without the crushing weight of techno-stress. You reclaim your personal time, your sleep quality, and your ability to engage deeply with the work that actually matters.
Thank everyone for joining our 3-part mini-series Human Capital Intelligence series presented by EAQ and Associates. We will continue to explore the intersection between business problems, operations, and strategy. HR architect Ernest Goss uses Six Sigma and data-driven architecture to solve complex organizational problems. We invite you to visit their website at eaqassociates.com. Join us for episode number 7. We will be discussing data privacy versus productivity tracking in our next session. Our goal is to equip you with the tools to turn your human capital into a sustainable competitive advantage and build the bridge that sustains a viable organization while creating opportunities for its employees. We'll see you next time.